Good afternoon, everyone. It's noon, and so this meeting is now called to order. Mr. Coley, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Askew.
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Herbert.
Here.
Commissioner Pennell.
Here.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Small.
Here.
Commissioner Worden.
Here.
All present.
Thank you very much. For our first action today, pursuant to Executive Orders 16 and 34 issued by Governor Bill Lee, which allow for this public meeting to be conducted by electronic means to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, I'd like to entertain a motion that this board makes the determination for this meeting to be conducted electronically. Commissioners, to make a motion, please start by stating your name. Is there a motion?
Gary Ashton, so moved.
And we need a second, please.
Adrian Brown, Simpson Brown, second.
Is there any discussion from the commissioners? Hearing none, Mr. Coley, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Askew.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Small.
Aye.
Commissioner Worden.
Aye.
The determination is passed, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Our next item of business is approval of the meeting minutes from May 21st, 2020, as were mailed to the commissioners. Commissioners, to make a motion, please start by stating your name. Do we have a motion?
Tobby Small, so
Sarah
moved.
Pennell, so moved. Second, so moved, Sarah Pennell.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from the commissioners? Hearing none, Mr. Coley, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Askew.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Small.
Aye.
Commissioner Worden.
Aye.
The minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. We have several resolutions to consider today, and I want to recognize Gabe to get us started.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. Today, I'd like to recognize Mark Walker, our Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, to give you a brief overview of the new pilot time of use rates for our electric system and to our amendments to the purchase power adjustment amendment, which will be a second and final reading. So, Mark.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. Good afternoon. I'm going to give you somewhat of a high-level overview today of the rate action items that are before you for your consideration on second and final reading. You will recall last month you did vote to approve these items on first reading, and of course rate actions in accordance with the charter do require two readings. So I'm just going to give you a high-level overview today since you had a detailed presentation last week. And just as a reminder what those rate action items are, as Gabe mentioned, we are asking for the adoption of the pilot time of use electric rates for our residential and small and mid-sized business customers. We also do have several changes to our purchase power adjustment mechanism that we'll talk about here in just a moment. And then we have some housekeeping updates to various rate schedules. And specifically, those include for all of our residential rates to replace the term customer charge with basic service charge. The verbiage basic service charge is what has appeared on our residential customers' bills, I think dating back to 2002. So we do need to make that change for consistency purposes. And then we're also making a few wording changes on our other electric rate schedules to better match language that's in our TVA wholesale rates. So again, that's another change for consistency purposes And the housekeeping updates, if Resolution 1414 today is approved on second reading, will go into effect in November. So talk just for a few minutes about our pilot time of use rates. And again, this was gone over in detail last month, but just want to mention that the rates themselves, being able to offer time of use rates for residential and smaller and mid-sized business customers is made possible because we've recently completed our deployment of advanced meters for all systems, but in this case for electric. So we now have the technology in place to be able to offer it to these customer classes. Our larger electric commercial and industrial customers already have access to time of use rates, and many of them are already on that. So now we're able to offer it to all of our electric customer classes. And really the key to this is we're going to be able to provide participating customers greater control over their monthly bills and opportunities to save money. And as a reminder, the rate structure for the time of use rates will include rates for on-peak hours and off-peak hours, with the rate for off-peak hours being about 1/3 of the level of the on-peak rate. The on-peak rate's about 20 cents per kilowatt hour. The off-peak rate's about 6.5 cents. And that off-peak rate is also about 2.5 cents lower than the standard residential rate. So there is opportunities for savings. For many of the participants, though, it will require that they have an intentional shift in the time of their power usage from on-peak hours to off-peak hours. And a classic example of that is doing the laundry, say in the summer months, as opposed to doing the laundry in the middle of the day, the middle of the afternoon, or early evening, and using your washer and dryer. Maybe you do it in the early morning hours, the late evening hours, or on the weekends. And so a question you might have is, what are the on-peak hours and the off-peak hours? And I guess it's easier to start with the on-peak. For the colder winter months, November through March, on-peak hours are 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. During the spring and summer months of April through October, it's 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. All other hours are off-peak, including weekends and holidays, for that matter. So actually about 83% of all hours, if you look over the course of a whole year, are off-peak. So there are opportunities to save there. And we will be doing promotions, some light marketing and promotions for these programs to our customers, and anyone who's interested, we will certainly look to be working with them on their usage profiles to educate them as well. Again, this is a pilot program, so participation levels will initially be limited. We're looking at probably no more than 200 residential customers to participate and about 150 business customers to participate in these programs. And it is optional, voluntary. We're not going out and handpicking certain customers. Again, we'll be doing some promotion and marketing, and for those who want to try it, we'll work with them and put them on the list, and we'll go from there. I think it's also important to note that if you do become a participant in the program and you feel like you find out that you're not saving like you thought, or you're finding it more difficult to shift your loads, your power usage, then you can revert back to your standard rate schedule. And if you do that, however, you need to stay on the standard schedule for a period of at least 12 months before moving back to time of use rates. And we are really excited about this. I think eventually, as time goes on, time of use rates will become more and more common for all of our electric customers as years go by. And if approved today on second and final reading, the time of use rates will go into effect in November. And for the purchase power adjustment amendments, we do have about 3 changes to the PPA. And just as a reminder, as Sherry mentioned last month, the purchase power adjustment dates back to when the board originally adopted it back in 2002. And that serves a purpose of automatically flowing through changes in TVA's wholesale electric prices, electric rates, to our retail rates, to our customers. And it started out with TVA having a quarterly fuel cost adjuster back in those days. That is now a monthly fuel cost adjuster. So that's the purpose of the PPA. So what's changing? Since the new time of use rates will be adjusted by the PPA, they need to be included and mentioned in the PPA. So that's one of the changes. We're also going to be resetting our base power rates to incorporate or reflect current wholesale power cost. And that's not going to change what we bill, how we bill our customers in any way. That is really somewhat of a housekeeping change. Every so often, you need to update your base rates to reflect the current wholesale power cost. The last time we did that was in 2011, so it's time to do that again. And then finally, an important change is we need to include some language in the PPA that will allow us to use the new TVA partnership credit dollars for purposes and projects such as home weatherization, also to fund the future solar purchases through TVA's Green Invest program. Maybe we'll use it to defer an electric rate increase in the future, and other projects and initiatives that have yet to be identified. So we need to include some language in the PPA to allow us to have that flexibility. And if approved today, the PPA changes will actually go into effect next month in July. And in closing, Resolution 1414 does amend our electric rate schedules to provide for the time of use rates, also amends the purchase power adjustment for the items we just mentioned, and also the housekeeping updates we talked about a few minutes ago will go into effect as well. There's different effective dates as we've talked about on that. PPA is July, the others are really November. And that really concludes all I have to say. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. We have a question from Commissioner Pennell. Commissioner, if you'd unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you. My question has to do with the pilot program, and I'm sorry if I got this confused, but so we have a pilot program that is going to move forward with this resolution if approved, and that when is the pilot program end, and what happens after the pilot program ends?
There's not a defined date as far as when the pilot would end. The purpose of any pilot is to learn. My guess is probably 12 months would be the duration of the pilot before we would make any adjustments if needed, and then offer it to a broader spectrum of our customers or open it up to the entire residential and GSA 1, GSA 2, which is small and mid-sized business customer classes. So I would say about 12 months, but there's nothing in the resolution itself that defines the period of time.
Thank you. And so moving forward, do you anticipate that the time of use will always be elective for customers?
I think for some period of time it will be voluntary. If we had our crystal ball out and we're looking into the future, I think you would maybe find a time where time of use rates are the default rates, whereas now we have what we call standard rates, which are not time of use. But I could see a point in time, 5-10 years from now, perhaps it just depends, that's going to be the standard rate schedule for all customers to have time of use rates, because it's really just a better way to do it. It reflects the true better reflects the cost of the power itself, in particular the cost of generation, and it's just a better matchup in rate making. So a long-winded answer, but I think at some point in time it'll be the default.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Are there any other utilities that only offer time of use rates at this time in our region or other places?
That's a good question. There may be certain areas of the country where that is the default, and probably is. I'd be guessing off the top of my head. I might say, California and some of the areas out west, that is just the standard. And if you wanted something else, maybe you have to sort of opt out of that to be on a different schedule. But I would say probably with some confidence that there is. I'm just don't know for sure off the top of my head which utilities and which regions, but.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Do we have any other questions from any commissioners?
Just very briefly. So Mark, as you think about time of usage and having that be the kind of standard process, what will be the drawback for us for doing that?
Well, I think the drawback would be, we'd make sure we need to get the rate structures appropriate for an entire customer profile, because you could have some customers that it's more difficult to use power during certain times of the day than others. So I think before we would make, and again, I think if we're talking years down the road, you would really have to, be careful with the spreads between the on-peak and the off-peak and such, because you certainly don't want to penalize customers and have their costs go up as a result of that. So you have to be, you'd have to be very careful in how you structure your rates and that.
Okay, thank you.
So, a potential drawback is you don't want to force it on everybody and say, well, now my costs are going up. Now I'm forced to shift. I think just with the technology in place, you can see maybe a future date where that just becomes the standard. And then there's customers that it doesn't work for, and then they could, revert or opt out and have more of a standard schedule.
Right.
All right. If there are no other questions from other commissioners, is there a motion for Resolution 1414 on second and final reading?
Tabby Small,
Sarah,
so moved.
Sarah Pennell, second.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. Members of the public were invited to pre-register to address the board on this action. We had no one register to speak on this resolution. So, Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Askew.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Small.
Aye.
Commissioner Worden.
Aye.
Resolution 1414 has passed on second reading.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coley. I'd like to now recognize Gabe to introduce our next agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. Commissioners, the board gave us previous approval to enter into a long-term gas contract that would provide significant savings for our customers. That authority for that resolution expires at the end of June. So I want to introduce Mike Boland, Vice President of Utility Transformation, to discuss us extending that authority. Mike.
Thank you, Gabe. As Gabe just said, last November, we came to you with a long-term gas supply contract and asked for authority to enter into that contract. The contract is with Tenergy, and as part of the contract, we were looking to enter into about 10% of our annual sales in this arrangement. The term's very long, but as part of that arrangement, Tenergy is offering a fairly substantial discount on the price of the natural gas. The discount in the contract is 30 cents a decatherm versus a current wholesale market price of about $1.60 a decatherm. So there's very substantial savings. The way Tenergy is able to achieve that is they prepay for their gas supply that they then turn around and sell to us. In order for Tenergy to prepay for the gas supply, they issue bonds that they turn around then and purchase their supply of natural gas. With the pandemic, the bond market became unsettled, and the relationship between tax-exempt and taxable bonds have become non-standard, if you will. So to date, we have not been able to make this transaction work just yet. The original resolution called for the authority to enter in this transaction to end on June 30th. We have prepared resolution 1416 to give us the authority to extend the contracting authority until December 31st, 2020. Hopefully by then the bond markets will settle to a point that this transaction will be able to move forward and we can achieve the savings for our customers. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions from any of the commissioners? All right, hearing none. Is there a motion for Resolution 1416, extending the period of authorization to December 31st, 2020 for the execution of a natural gas supply contract with Tenergy Corporation and Energy Acquisition Corporation for a term of up to 31 years on first and final reading? Do we have a motion?
Celeste Herbert, so moved.
All right, we need a second.
Tybee Small, second.
Thank you very much. Mr. Coley, would you please call the roll?
Yes, on Resolution 1416, Commissioner Askew,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Small,
Aye.
Commissioner Worden.
Aye.
Resolution 1416 has passed.
Thank you. I'd like to now recognize Gabe to introduce the next agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. Commissioners, I'd like to introduce Chris Hood, our controller, to present 3 separate amendments to existing resolutions regarding our retirement system. Resolution 1417 is an amendment to the resolution that establishes governance over our retirement system, and in resolutions 1418 and 1419 are amendments to the investment policies for our 401k plan and our OPEB trust fund. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Bolus. Today, Commissioners, I have 3 resolutions for you proposing changes to our retirement system. Each of these comes to you as a recommendation from the board's Audit and Finance Committee. The resolution that established the retirement system was enacted in 1999. As a bit of history, the city transferred over the pension assets to KUB in 1999. KUB had an existing 401k plan, and we took through this resolution the 401k plan, the pension assets, and the disability benefits, and rolled those into what we now know as the retirement system. In addition, this resolution outlined the governance framework for the retirement system, including outlining the responsibilities of the board, the president and CEO, as well as the recently formed investment and administrative committees via this resolution. Another thing that the resolution did, and that's what we're here to talk about today, is the resolution required in Section 10 that KUB have a trustee for its retirement system plans. That trustee would act as a fiduciary for the plans, acting in the best interest of the plans and the plan participants via the trust documents as they held the assets in custody. One of the things that has been occurring in recent times is the fact that many of the plans are no longer able to establish a fiduciary relationship through a trustee. Next slide, Jay. Fewer banks are willing to step up and hold that fiduciary relationship with plans. Instead, they are opting to act as a custodian of funds. Custodian performs the same administrative functions as a trustee. However, a custodian does not hold themselves out to be a fiduciary. Thus, they limit their legal liability to the plans. KB has recently worked with its investment advisor, Mercer Consulting, to do an RFP back in 2018 in an attempt to select a new trustee for KB's pension plan. At best, the results were disparaging. We got 5 banks that were willing to step up to act as a trustee. Of those, we brought 3 of those in and ultimately ended up going back with our incumbent provider. So in the meantime, we have continued to work to identify other potential trustees, and what we are finding is that if you are either very, very large or very small, banks will act in this role. KB's pension plan is neither very, very large nor is it very small. Thus, we're falling into the same trap that many of our constituents are in the fact that they cannot identify trustees for their plans. In fact, our consultant at Mercer only has one other pension plan that currently has a trustee. So a little bit of a change in times here and the way banks are willing to act. But as a result of that, we are asking for some flexibility from the board in a proposed amendment. Our OPEB trust, which was written later than the retirement system resolution, actually allows for either a custodian or a trustee to serve the plan. What we would like to do for the retirement system is allow for that same flexibility that we would be allowed to utilize a custodian if we were to make a change. And also, if we were to make a change, we would bring it back to the board's Audit and Finance Committee before selecting ultimately a provider. So that's what Resolution 1417 is. It is a request to the full board upon recommendation from the Audit and Finance Committee to allow for flexibility for a custodian of KUB's retirement system plans. So with that, if there are any questions.
Chris, Tavi Small here. Couple questions. We were looking for a new trustee because we were not satisfied with the work of our incumbent trustee, which we went back to. First question.
Exactly. Which
and then,
tells you the RFP was not very successful.
Right. So my question is, if we go with a custodian versus a trustee, what are the biggest difference? I know they said the trustee acts as a fiduciary. Who would then take on those responsibilities?
So really, as far as administratively, what you want this entity to do, which is hold your assets and act according to your request, both parties do those identically.
Right.
Really, what you are doing with a trustee is they are holding themselves out as a fiduciary, which expands their legal basically responsibility. In order for there really to be a true difference here for us, something would have to go wrong with the plan, in which KUB would be willing to stand up and bring suit against that body, which is going to be a very large entity. So I think for our purposes, as far as administrative functions, these items are really the same, and that's what many plans like ours are having to do is utilize the custodian feature of the bank. It may even be the same entity. A bank could be a trustee or a custodian, except many of the banks are just not holding themselves out to be trustees anymore.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions from any other commissioners?
Kathy, this is Jerry. Essentially, we become the fiduciary then. Is that right?
Yes, we have that responsibility right now. So KUB's responsibilities do not change. It's just the fact that we lose that standing with a trustee. Now, we may still be able to locate one, but our efforts have not been promising so far.
Any other questions? All right, then hearing none, commissioners, this is a matter that has come as a recommendation from the Audit and Finance Committee, so it requires no motion or second. Also, members of the public were invited to pre-register to address the board on this action, and we had no one register to speak on this resolution. Mr. Coley, would you please call the roll call for Resolution 1417?
Yes, Commissioner Askew.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Small.
Aye.
Commissioner Worden.
Aye.
Resolution 1417 has passed.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. I'd like to again recognize Chris Hood to present resolutions 1418 and 1419.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. Two more items here revolving around the retirement system. These resolutions are requests to amend the investment policies for the 401k plan and the OPEB trust. Before we get into the amendments, a brief overview of what the investment policies actually do. The investment policies basically create a framework for the investment committee to act. It provides guidelines on how to allow investments. It provides guidelines on which investments have been selected as far as asset classes for the plans. And specifically for the OPEB trust, it provides targets by which we should align our investments. The other thing that the investment policies do is provide us standards of measurements as the investment committee by which to judge the plan. Any changes to the investment policy must come to the full board. As far as how does amendment get before the board, background on that, the retirement system staff would work on any proposed changes to the investment policies. We would work with our investment advisor, legal counsel, and also the system's actuaries to make sure that any amendments are in good standing, that they are legally sound, and also that we would know any cost to the plan of any actions we would be suggesting. Beyond that, they're recommended to the investment committee, and then if passed there, they would go to the president and CEO, who would recommend those changes to the board's audit and finance committee. These changes are being brought to the board through the audit and finance committee via resolution there. The changes that we bring today for the 401k are in essence housekeeping. There is one request that we would like in order to add an asset class to our 401k for our participants. I'm going to start out with the amendments that are housekeeping in nature. First thing we would need to do is the resolution that was just passed by the board, resolution 1417. We would need to pull that information into the investment policy for the 401k. There's some updating of terms that we need to do. The glide path offerings that we have in our 401k were formerly known as lifestyle funds by most fund offerings. Today, those are commonly called target date funds. So just an update of terminology, no change in investment. The other thing we need to do is just update some of the standards of measurement for the investment committee. But the real thing I want to talk to you about today is the addition of a new asset class for our 401k participants. If you look at the chart on the right, you will see two columns. You see a red column, which includes our passively invested funds. These are index funds. As you see, all the columns are shaded in. We've got offerings for our participants in each of these investment classes. The active column looks pretty much like the passive column, with the exception you notice the mid-cap active tier there. KUB does not currently offer to our participants a mid-cap fund under active management. We would propose today to add that asset class. You will also notice that there is a bold box around the mid-cap, the small cap value, and the small cap growth in the active management tier. Ultimately, what we may do if we work with our investment advisor is mirror that of the passive investments, in which we offer what is called a SMID cap fund, or a joint mid-cap, small cap fund to our participants. We think this adds added flexibility for our participants, and it gives them the same active management opportunities as they would have with a passively managed index fund. So that's the changes for 401k. I'm going to touch on OPEB, and then I'll cover any questions. OPEB trust, really there's a couple of just general housekeeping items there. We would not bring these to the board had it not have been for the changes for the 401k investment policies. A couple things that are already going on here. The investment policy for the OPEB calls out for an actuarial valuation to occur at least every 2 years. For the longest of time, KUB has performed that on an annual basis. Now state law requires that to be done annually, as well as does the GASB, or the Government Accounting Standards Board. So we just need to update the document to current practice so it would match up with state law. In addition, there's some terminology that needs to be updated. There are numerous places in the document where it refers to officials of the OPEB board or officers. We just want to clean that up to where everyone is considered to be a member of the OPEB board. So really just housekeeping on the OPEB and a couple of items there on the 401k. This brings us to the resolutions that are before you today. Resolution 1418 and 1419 both come as recommendations from the Audit and Finance Committee. Resolution 1418 adopts changes to the 401k investment policy. 1419 does the same for the OPEB trust, and if approved by this board, they would go into effect on July 1st, 2020. With that, if anyone's got any questions about the investment policy changes.
Do we have any questions from any of the commissioners?
I've got a quick question. John Worden.
Go ahead, John.
Chris, do we post the internal management fees for the active and passive funds? Do we make that information available to employees? Because active managed and passive can have quite a big spread between the difference in fees. Is that information openly available? I know sometimes investment companies and fund companies can hide that information. Is that available?
So a little bit more of an answer than what your question actually was, Commissioner Worden. As an investment committee, we work with Mercer to constantly review funds. I mean, one of the things that we want to do, especially in our index funds, is make sure that we've got fees driven to the lowest point possible, not sacrificing performance, but at the same time making sure that our participants are paying the lowest fees possible. That being both the passive investive and active tiers. The other thing is through our Fidelity website, any participant can log in and access all the information they want on any of the funds, including fee structures. So that information is available to participants. If you are a participant that receives your information via mail, the funds also mail those out to participants as well individually. So participants do have access there to any of the information that they would desire.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions from commissioners at this time? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed. Commissioners, we're going to take 1418 and 1419 separately. And Resolution 1418 comes as a recommendation from the Audit and Finance Committee, so it requires no motion or second. Members of the public were invited to pre-register to address the board on this action, and we had no one registered to speak on this resolution. So, Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll call for Resolution 1418?
Yes. Commissioner Askew?
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert?
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell?
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Small?
Aye.
Commissioner Worden?
Aye.
Resolution 1418 has passed.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. We will move on now to Resolution 1419 that was also covered in Chris Hood's presentation. Are there any other questions on that resolution? Hearing none, Resolution 1419 also comes as a recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee, so it requires no motion or second. And again, members of the public were invited to pre-register to address the board on this action, and we had no one register to speak on this resolution. So, Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll for Resolution 1419?
Yes. Commissioner Askew?
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert?
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell?
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Small?
Aye.
And Commissioner Worden?
Aye.
Resolution 1419 has passed.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. I will now recognize Gabe for the President's report. Gabe?
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. Commissioners, we are all aware of the tremendous impact that COVID-19 has had on our community. And we've been watching closely with what the state and local agencies have been giving us as far as direction to reopening. And now we're beginning to talk about our next steps for getting to normal billing operations. I want to recognize Tiffany Martin, Director of our Customer Experience Group, to share the details of our plan, as well as how we're going to communicate with our customers and more importantly, how we're going to assist them. Tiffany.
Thank you, Mr. Bolus. Commissioners, I plan to spend some time sharing with you our tentative plan, as Mr. Bolus mentioned, for returning to normal billing practices, including resuming disconnections for non-payment. I'll start by providing a summary of some of the actions that we've taken to assist customers, as well as talk a little bit about our timeline and communications plan, and then additional measures we plan to take to assist customers. To recap some of those steps we've already taken, as the emergence of COVID-19 came into our area and the community began responding, we quickly suspended disconnections for non-payment for both residential and commercial customers. Our intent with that action was to remove some of the concern that may arise as businesses were closing and our community members were being asked to stay at home. And so, as you know, we want all of our customers to have safe and reliable utilities. Non-payment disconnects are kind of a last resort for us. Our goal is not to shut off utilities at any point. So we understood that during this period, more than ever, it was critical that those services be available to customers regardless of account history or payment at that time. In addition to suspending disconnections, we did begin also covering third-party payment transaction fees. We use a multitude of payment vendors to provide convenience to our customers. When we closed our service centers on April 1st, we did begin covering the cost of those fees, and to date we've reimbursed or covered approximately $240,000 in fees, and we'll continue to do that practice a bit longer as we're going through this process. We're also working with customers one-on-one and waiving late fees that may have accrued since March 16th when we stopped disconnections. If those individuals or businesses call us and indicate they're having difficulty paying their bill, and we'll continue to do that as well for a period of time. You may recall my presentation last month on TVA's Back to Business Credit Program. We are participating in that program and have applied for and are issuing credits for 2 months to one of our local manufacturers in the area for on-peak demand to help that manufacturer start business back up. So we had planned to continue participating in that program for its duration and, of course, apply for other customers as they become eligible for that. TVA did also offer the opportunity for local power companies to apply for a community cares grant that could be distributed to local nonprofit agencies providing pandemic relief. And we did apply for that for the maximum grant amount eligible to us, which was $80,000. And we requested those funds be distributed to the United Way of Greater Knoxville in the amount of $60,000 and the Knox County CAC for $20,000 to assist with utility bill payments. United Way helps a variety of agencies, so those funds won't be necessarily specific to utility payments, but some of those local nonprofits that they support do also help with utility bill payments. Through all of this, we really just wanted our customers to be aware of the steps that we were taking and also be aware of local assistance available to them. So we did spend some time increasing our communication via social media platforms, our KUB.org website, bill messages, and we also sent out an email to all of our customers that have provided us email information with basically the intent to just share with them that we're here to help. There are community resources, and the key is to just give us a call for assistance. Obviously, we took all those measures to keep and the impact is as low as it could be within our control. But we also had to think about the balance between deferred bill payment while understanding that some customers might have difficulty paying their bills if they have a large bill over several months. And so we've kind of kept that in balance as we made decisions about when to resume. So we've been watching closely and planning to hopefully resume disconnects as reopening plans wrap up for local and state government. So as of last night, Knox County will conclude their reopening plans effective July 1. They'll be following the state's plan at this point. And the city and the county have been pretty lock-synced during this process, so we anticipate that the city will do the same. With understanding that plan wrapping up on July 1st, we will be opening our walk-in centers in the community on July 6th, and then we plan to resume disconnections for non-payment the following month on August 3rd. Door notices will begin being delivered a week prior of that August 3rd date on July 27th, and this will allow those customers that are first in queue to be disconnected to have a minimum of 7 days notice. However, the door notice isn't going to be the only way that they're made aware that they will be potentially disconnected. Jay, if you'll go back one slide for me. I'll talk a little bit about the communications plan shortly, but I will say that in addition to looking at the city and the county, we did look at some of the other utilities. And you can move forward now. Thank you. TVA conducted a survey to gather some of this information for their local power providers. And so you'll see here kind of a summary of that data. It looks as if most of the LPCs in the valley are going to resume disconnections by the end of June. Some did not suspend disconnections at all. And we will definitely be trailing many of our peers and be alongside a select few with resuming disconnects in August. We do understand that as we restart this process, communication is going to be critical. And we actually started some of the communication earlier this month, talking with some of our local partners and stakeholders, just making them aware of what our tentative plan might be. And we really just did that to allow for some time for feedback before we began communicating with customers. We did receive some good suggestions on ways to communicate, and there was always that encouragement for us to remain flexible with our plan. And so I say that today's plan is a tentative plan, but we've got to kind of move to our communication steps. So you might hear me say that a couple of times, because I will say we have changed this plan multiple times as we've just really tried to watch what's going on around us in the community. We have actually incorporated some of the feedback that we received from our partners and stakeholders. And so later today, we plan to send out postcards or emails to every customer, making them aware of our plan to resume disconnections in August, as well as that we're here to help. We will also have some additional touch points with customers. July bills will feature important bill messages. We're going to add some new content to our social media platforms and website. And additionally, we'll start making proactive phone calls that are automated at this point and send additional emails to those customers with past due balances. And so our intent is really to add 2 or 3 additional touch points than normal to ensure customers are aware of what's to come and to provide ample time for them to contact us to make payments, payment arrangements, or to seek assistance. Regarding assistance that is available, we first wanted to start with what things we could do as a utility to continue to assist customers. So we will continue waiving payment transaction fees and late fees through September 30th. And we're also going to not charge for our door notice delivery fee for that same period of time. So we are going to remove those fees in an effort to reduce as many fees as possible for customers. We will also allow for very flexible payment arrangements, giving an opportunity for past due balances to be paid for up to 15 months. It will really just depend on the individual, but we will allow for up to 15-month payment arrangements. We also plan to leverage the benefits of our levelized billing plan for those customers that might have a smaller past due balance, but still may struggle with getting that paid. That will allow them to pay that past due as an average with their 12-month average as part of that LBP program. We also internally have an internal credit rating that we look at. It's really impacted by late payments. It's not something that's reported to the outside credit bureaus, but it's really used more for internal decisions on program eligibility and additional security deposit requirements. We are going to remove any deductions that happen from March 16th through that September 30th period as well, so that those customers don't have a lasting impact with us. So those things will go away. In addition to just us taking those steps, we do also want to make you guys aware, and you're already aware of this, we are lucky in the Knoxville community to have several funding sources for a multitude of things, but utility bill assistance is one of those. We have close to about $3 million available from LIHEAP funds managed by CAC, the Project Help program, and other CAC funding for bill payment assistance. There's also other LIHEAP funds available in other counties that we service. And then LIHEAP and Project Help have relaxed their income guidelines to serve more individuals and families, understanding that there will be potentially a greater need at this point. Per our contacts from CAC, there is some discussion about there may be some additional funds available through the CARES Act and other sources, but we're unsure of what that will be at this time. But I suspect there will be more funding available there. We also can't forget the network of the other 200 social services agencies and faith-based organizations that we already work closely with. They provide assistance regularly on utility bills. Some of them, of course, will be somewhat impacted by COVID-19, but those that are not, I suspect that they will still be assisting customers, and we'll work to work with them and direct our customers to those organizations. So all that to say, we're going to help. For us, kind of in closing, we know that our efforts will have to continue. As I said earlier, we may adjust this plan if we hear something happen differently, which means we may send out more communication if changes need to be made. We'll continue to work with those local partners and stakeholders, as I mentioned earlier, and then, of course, provide updates on customer impacts. I think what's important is just customers understanding that we're here to help. Just contact us, because that is really our goal here, is to keep utilities on. So that is all I have for today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Tiffany. We do have a couple. First, Michelle, if you would unmute your mic and ask your question, please.
My question, I guess I have a couple. One about are grants available to businesses who have received a government loan, or they're just two separate and not have nothing to do with each other? And I guess the next question is really, do we have a flood of disconnects that are on the horizon? And based on kind of your knowledge of that percentage, has it jumped 30%, 50% of disconnects? And the money that you show available, 2.7 million, and it seems like there's a lot out there. Just do you think that there's enough money out there right now that can cover this, the amount of disconnects to help?
Great question. Yeah, great question. So to answer your first question related to grants, so the grants that were provided in LIHEAP and other funds are typically for individuals. They're not necessarily business funds. So a lot of those small businesses that did receive funding or loans, those are they're separate. They're not one and the same. They are different things. There aren't a lot of resources, to be quite honest, that are just geared towards businesses. We are continuously looking for those types of resources because we recognize that we'll have small businesses that need support. The primary things that I've talked about today are going to be more for individuals and families versus businesses. However, the measures that we're taking internally, those will apply to all of our customers in terms of waiving fees and things of that nature. That will be eligible to every customer. To answer your question about the disconnect process and do we have a large group of people that may be disconnected? So right now we have approximately 25 to 30,000 customers that have past due balances. That's not unusual. We typically have customers that will carry a past due balance. Watching over the last 3 months, which of those customers would move towards a disconnection status, probably about 5,000 to 6,000 of those would, which would mean essentially those folks would be eligible for a door notice that we mentioned. But typically, historically, only about 20% of those that receive a door notice actually are disconnected. So we're looking at about 1,200 people potentially that would be disconnected. So our goal is not to have 1,200 people disconnected. It's that they contact us when they receive one of those communications so that we can set up a payment arrangement and get them directed to assistance so that doesn't happen. Hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
Next, we have a question from Commissioner Herbert. If you would unmute your mic and ask your question.
I think you may have just answered the question, Tiffany, but I didn't get quite the number. And if we have a breakdown between residential and business customers that are in the past due category.
Sure, that's a great question. Of the 25 to 27,000, only about 2,000 of those are business customers. The rest are residential customers.
And of those thousands that we have, what percentage have communicated with us about their situations?
That's a great question. To be honest, I haven't pulled that statistic. We have been available through the call center and have received lots of calls. So I suspect that just knowing historically the contacts that we receive when customers are experiencing financial difficulty, I would say we've probably received calls from maybe 10% of those customers. But many of them don't call until it's an emergency, to be honest.
Well, it looks like we're going to have a lot of communication that we're going to have to unroll here in the next 2 months. Staff-wise, are we prepared for that?
We are prepared. Obviously, it will be busy. We're preparing for it to be very busy. We'll be using some of our virtual hold technology to help reduce hold times as much as possible. We began training up our customer service representatives on what things we're going to do from an assistance standpoint. So I think we're ready, but it will be busy. Absolutely.
Thank you.
We have a question or ask.
Yes, Tiffany, this is Jerry. Do we have a sense for whether these potential disconnects are concentrated in any specific geographic areas?
That is a really good question. I have pulled some statistics about that without having it in front of me. I can't really be good at sharing the actual facts, but we do have about 50% of those disconnects are kind of concentrated in about 3 to 5 zip codes. I'm happy to follow back up with additional information on that. But it's the zip codes that are typical where we have disconnections. So we've not seen a trend or a change per se, but we do have an area where we have about 50% of our disconnects happen in one area, and then the rest are kind of the other 50% is dispersed across our service area.
It may already be done, but it seems to me if we know that half of the potential disconnects are in one geographic area or in 2 2 or 3 zip codes, some of which I assume are contiguous. It may be worth our while, in addition to communication, to go ahead and start proactively working with the organizations that can provide financial assistance, and try to maybe even have some, with social distancing, we need to be careful, but resource centers, for lack of a better term, in those neighborhoods so that people can access that help. A lot of times, it's certainly in my conversation, in some parts of town, it's still pretty intimidating to call KUB. It's intimidating to try to work your way through the system. So if we can think about doing it safely, I would love for us to be proactive and open up resource centers or something like that in those areas.
That's a great suggestion, and I'm glad you said that. You know more than anybody, we do have a lot of social service agencies that work with us, and so we are being intentional about reaching out to those social service agencies to determine if there are things they can do to proactively contact customers on our behalf. I think you're right, some customers are intimidated about calling KUB, not really understanding what they need to do, and so we have thought about, could we leverage some of those relationships, because those organizations have a direct tie to those members of the community. So we will continue to work towards that.
I've got another.
All right.
Another quick question.
Go ahead.
Tiffany, thank you for your presentation. It's obvious that KUB is really and you and your team have put a lot of thought into how to navigate this difficult situation. I would just follow up with what Jerry said. This is the time when the blueprint is really put to the test. And anything we can do to be proactive prior to the door notice, prior to the disconnect, I think is really gonna benefit the organization, and it might mean that it seems like this may be beyond the normal call center training kind of thing, where we are training up a team of folks. It's not happening till August. If we can send people out to actually do the disconnecting, we should be able to send some folks out that can sit down and have a thoughtful conversation and talk to folks face to face. Be the person walking in with the solution. I think that would totally change the whole dynamic of these impending disconnections. Businesses that are closed, that's going to be harder to do. But if we're proactive, I think it can change the nature of this onerous task that's in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have Commissioner Small.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was on mute, so they all skipped in front of me and asked most of my questions. But I would follow up on what Jerry and then John talked about. Is in the midst of a global pandemic, I think it's important that we operate in care and concern, and I do believe that we have to, if at all possible, think about different ways in which to communicate with folks. We do have a listing of those who are, I think it's about 1,200 people, and I think that we deploy resources differently. Instead of getting the door notice, maybe we get some information that says, you are about, we will restart this in August. You're about to, here are some resources, maybe do some proactive reaching out to folks safely, going to homes. If we are in certain zip codes, maybe we work with some elected officials, people who are trusted in those communities, to help maybe create some opportunity to reach out to those folks to say, listen, these are options for assistance, because we don't want, I mean, I would just feel, I still have some concern about potentially cutting people's electricity off during a global pandemic, particularly if people talk about a new wave coming. And so I just think that we have to be really, really careful and show as much care and concern to our communities as possible. I know Gabe is committed to that, but I think I wanted my thoughts and comments to go on record that we have got to do, we have got to operate in care and concern, particularly when it comes to disconnecting folks. And so if we can do the proactive stuff on the front end, senior leadership team, and deploy resources differently, and really meeting people where they are, because I think if there is a scariness about approaching KUB, then if they're not coming to us, we got to figure out ways to go to them so that people are comfortable having those conversations. So whatever we can do, if we need to, if there's anything that I can help do, but I do think we need to really think creatively about how we move the next steps. I mean, that's really going to be a make or break for us in terms of perception of the organization.
I agree, and I may have not articulated this well, so my apologies, but I agree. We definitely have some plans to communicate a little differently than we have, but you're correct. We can always be doing more because you're right. Everyone has their own set of circle of trusted individuals that they'll go to when something or they're in crisis. And so we need to be able to make connections with those entities. But we will be, in the past, we would have not sent postcards. And so we're planning to send those this week. And that postcard is going to say, this is when we're planning to resume disconnections. We want you to continue services. There are resources. This is how you find out about those resources. So that is really the intent to start these emails and postcards today, is for people to know this is coming and there is assistance in the community. You don't necessarily have to call KUB, but our goal is to get you to the right set of individuals or companies or businesses or whatever that might be, agencies, to assist you. And as you and Commissioner Askew have mentioned, just reaching out to some of the stakeholders in the community. So that was really part of the reason that we reached out to some of the elected officials and others early on, to get a feel for what they thought might be beneficial in terms of communication, as well as just working really closely with CAC and some of our other partners. We have found that they do have a close connection with those in the community, especially in those neighborhood centers. I think the challenge just has been they're not completely in their normal mode of operation either. So it's just navigating being in the pandemic, trying to assist, but also everyone's keeping their staff safe as well. So it's been a challenge, but you're exactly right. We are committed to that because we understand this is a difficult time. And I will say again, if we have to stop in the middle of this process and go backwards and say, okay, we're not resuming, that's still an option. It just is that balance between having a 6 or 7 month bill. Now, how do we make sure that we can get you all the assistance you need and get you the right payment arrangement? So I definitely appreciate you all's comments, because they're warranted, and those things are on our minds as well.
Hey, Tiffany, just one quick follow-up. So we will be listing those resources in the information that we send to folks, correct?
We will. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Or will we direct them to a place? Because I think if you list it right there, they will, if they see a CAC, they can pick up the phone and call them directly.
We will be directing them to a page that has all those resources, but you make a good point. It may be worth us making an edit to actually go ahead and include CAC's phone number in those resources, after talking with them and making sure they're comfortable with us putting it actually on that material.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Next we have Commissioner Simpson Brown. If you'd unmute your mic and make your comment, please.
Well, pretty much my comments have already been made by the other commissioners, and I just kind of wanted to echo and reiterate what they've already said. in support of the plan that you have, and being proactive about contacting and partnering with those community stakeholders so that we can make sure that, you know, as John said, you know, really living that blueprint during this time. So I just wanted to just say amen. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have another comment from Commissioner Askew.
Just real quickly, Tiffany, first of all, let me say that I know I speak for the commissioners in saying we're really confident in your leadership in this. We know you have a heart for the least of these, and so we're confident that you're going to do what needs to be done. I would point out that I suspect, though I haven't seen the list of zip codes you referred to earlier, I suspect that some of those zip codes are the same one that don't have broadband access. So referring them to a web page is not as helpful as it might be to list those resources in some form.
That is a good point, and I have not cross-referenced that, but that is something that I will look at as well. And thank you for your confidence. We're lucky to have a great team behind us that do a lot of hard work. So I get to be in the board presentations, but they do the hard work. So I appreciate that.
We have one more comment from Commissioner Pennell.
Thank you. Yeah, I echo everything everybody else has said about the care that's going on here. And Jerry touched on my comment, so I was thinking, is there any way that the hang tag can have something where somebody could drop it in the mailbox, check a box, put their name on it and say, I want assistance, so that if they can't, I mean, then surely they can get to a mailbox. Or some sort of drop box or something that allows them to have the chance to be heard.
That's a good suggestion. I'll definitely take that back and see if that's something we can get in place.
And we have another question from Commissioner Small.
I think you're muted, Commissioner Small.
I am muted. My wife likes me when I am muted. No, what I was saying is maybe even do a special rounded up. This is something I can talk about offline to the staff about. Maybe think about a special rounded up campaign. So for those, we can maybe ask our fellow citizens to help each other, right? So it said, hey, would you donate an extra, whatever it may be, to help our low income or our customers who may be having trouble with their utility bills, and so maybe creatively, find some additional dollars, to help support these through things like Round It Up. So it's just some things that are in my mind. So we can talk offline to staff.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to the suggestions.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner Small, and thank you to all the commissioners. We have had a very lively discussion on this. Tiffany, I think it's very clear that this is something that we all care a great deal about, and we appreciate all the work and the thought that you have put into this, and we're putting our trust in you going forward to do everything we can to help our customers that we know are going to continue to be in need with everything that's going on right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, I will turn it back over to Gabe.
Thank you, commissioners. I have jotted down all those suggestions. So I've got a folder, a pad full of ideas. I appreciate that. One thing that Tiffany alluded to, but she and I have met with both the city council member and the county commissioner of those districts, and they gave us a lot of good suggestions, which we're incorporating. So we are actively trying to make sure we get out and get the word out, and we want to make sure our customers, we do not want to disconnect. I mean, we said it enough times, but that's a last resort, and we're going to do all we can to keep that from happening. But we'll move on to the next item. As you recall, back in 2016, we began our grid modernization project with the goal of getting all the meters changed out in about 4 years. I'm pleased to announce that this past April, we finished that project. And I want to recognize Jamie Davis, the Director of Grid Mod, to tell you more about the project success. Jamie?
Thank you, Mr. Bolus. Commissioner's really excited to be here to talk about a milestone in the life of our grid modernization efforts. As I kind of step into this, I want to take us back down a trip a little bit down the memory lane, so to speak. This technology has been around a while, but really has advanced in the past decade. And some of KUB's first early efforts with this technology really date back to 2006, in which we had really probably our first two meaningful pilots of this technology. It's about 20,000 meters, one in the Deep West Knox gas-only area, and one in more of the Fort Sanders kind of campus area. And anytime you do a pilot, you start to learn about what you like about something and what maybe could be better. And definitely this project was one of those. Probably two of the key things that we learned was that the technology at the time, it was a one-way communication, meaning we could only receive reads from these meters, and we could not send commands back down to these meters to do things like remote disconnections and remote connections. And as well as we learned a lesson that we already really knew, which was that our topography in East Tennessee with the hills and valleys is challenging for wireless technology. So around 2008, we went and investigated a new vendor, Census Technologies, and it proved in a small pilot in 2008, 2009 to be something that we really felt was a viable technology for KUB. It was about 125 endpoints. We had all of our metering forms of electric, water, and gas. And for the first time, there was two-way technology, meaning, again, we could send signals kind of both ways. The good news of timing, sometimes you fall fortunate to when things kind of happen. And as part of the stimulus funding from the Obama administration in 2010, we were able to receive a Department of Energy Smart Grid grant as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It was nearly $4 million. It helped us pay for about half of this project. And as part of that project, you can see the map of where the bulk of where we installed meters. We installed about 6,000 meters on the University of Tennessee campus. Really were able to get all the area covered in that particular regard, all metering forms, all types of customers, and covered all of UT's meters. That particular pilot was the size of some people's installations in the local area. So it was a pilot for us, but it was still a very significant project. It took us about 4 years. And we also deployed system-wide base station or towers to help us read meters all over KUB's system. At the time, that design called for 11 towers, and we constructed those. And we also, as you can see on the map, connected the 4 substations in that UT area, in this smart grid area, with our fiber networks. That was really our first foray into constructing and utilizing fiber as a network. So after that project, we came to this board again, and this is a slide kind of from that time frame back in December 2013, really kind of wanting to look and make the case for full deployment. We had already in those pilots seen how it helps not only provide customer information, but also operation and reliability gains. But we also knew we were facing a little bit of a Century 2 aspect with our metering systems and our communication networks. We knew that the old style meters were becoming obsolete, along with the communication infrastructure that we had utilized up to that point, connecting our facilities or copper analog lines. They were starting to fail. They were analog. You don't hear that word many times over these days. Things were becoming digital. And as such, the folks that we leased some of those lines from were starting to end their support, and the support on those lines was very expensive. So we need to make a decision there. We knew that these technologies were providing other benefits, and one of those that we called out was environmental benefits. If you're not rolling a truck, you're saving gas, you're improving air quality, and we knew there were some intangibles around investment in that area. So we knew, taking about a year to do this research, that indeed it would give us an opportunity to make that business case for full deployment, as well as evaluate our efforts coming out of that pilot project. So we come back to this board in December of 2014, kind of with that research, and we said we really don't know what the industry is calling up as a recipe, if you will, for a smart grid or for a modernized grid. But for KUB, we knew that it encapsulated certain pieces for us. Obviously, it incorporated the meters and the advanced meters and the nature of what the new technology in those meters provide for remote meter reading, remote disconnecting, reconnections. But also we knew that we wanted to really invest in our communication network. Again, the towers that would read those meters, but along with that, the fiber that would connect our operational facilities. We knew that both of those would lay foundations to allow us to do a lot of different things, both operationally and customer based. It was the first time we were able to have a customer portal that allowed customers to be able to see their daily and hourly information. That was brave new world back then, but we knew that that was part of it, along with us being able to invest in our distribution systems for automation and control to ultimately help us to improve reliability and ultimately benefit our customers. So that spring, we came back and requested $106 million over the next 10 years, that we would have the bulk of that, a 4-year deployment of our advanced meters of $82 million, and that we would indeed deploy fiber across all of our system to have a backbone there that would connect all of our operational facilities. And then we would begin learning more and deploying distribution automation on our electric system. So after 4 long years of hard work, we have recently completed the project, as Mr. Bolus said, on April 15th of this year. Over the course of that time frame, we installed about 384,000 meters, and that equates to about 500 every workday. And that's a lot of meters to install in a given day. And at our peak, we were doing about 650 meters. So if you just think about workers going down your street, it was kind of like Army ants in some cases as far as where they were installing them. We couldn't have done it without our wonderful contractor, Utility Partners of America. They utilized at the peak 37 folks here locally, working here in our area and living in our area. They are a national firm that have done this all across the nation, as well as we had 11 of our KUB technicians assisting the work and handling some of the more challenging situations. Pictured on the right there is the last customer that received of the formal project, the last meter. That's Ms. Davis that lives over on River Shores Drive. You may know Ms. Davis more famously as former Commissioner Keisha Thompson's mom. And so she was gracious enough right during the middle of the pandemic to take a appropriately socially distanced selfie with our supervisor in grid, one of our supervisors in grid mod, Michael Allison. Of note, Mike has worked at KUB for many years now. He actually started as a meter reader here at KUB and envisioned the day in which this type of technology would help both us and our customers. And so it's great that we've had many of our tenured employees get to participate in this project. But again, she was gracious enough to come out and take a picture with us. And also as part of this project, I mentioned that we had installed 11 towers as part of our pilot back in the day with the DOE grant. What we have realized again is the challenge of the topography as it relates to RF radio frequency here in our area, and ultimately we have had to construct up to 24 in order to be able to successfully read those meters. And so that's been a challenge to have, but at the end of the day, we've been able to meet that goal. So we're very pleased about that. From a timing and budgetary perspective, again, good news here is that the team worked really hard to be sure that they did it within the time frame they had committed to, as well as to stay on budget. I'm pleased to say that we did finish 2 or 3 months early, and at the same point in time, saved a little bit of money. You can see there from that $82 million original budget that we spent right at $76 million for a $5.7 million savings. How that really breaks down, how they saved that was we had a wonderful contractor. They were on a fixed fee arrangement. We paid them by the month to install meters, and because they were efficient, they stayed on the job and they were really hard working, they finished early. And so we didn't have to pay them for a few months. And so that was great. As well as the team really worked throughout it to be good stewards of our ratepayers' money. And as a result, through some staffing that we didn't fill positions and extra responsibilities were taken on by the team, along with some consulting dollars and things like that we just didn't feel like we needed to utilize. The team was able to save another $3 million in that particular regard. So when we built the business case for the deployment of the meters, we knew that there were certain tangible benefits that could be achieved. And as you can see on the slide here, since the inception of the project, we've saved approximately $6.4 million with this technology as it relates to meter reading, $5 million in just general meter reading that occurs every month. We're not sending folks out to read these meters anymore. Again, we just read them remotely. When folks move in and out, we used to have to send somebody there to read it, and we don't have to do that anymore. And that's saved us $1 million since the inception of the project. And then as we have to disconnect and reconnect folks, there are switches inside of our residential meter forms that we're able to do that. We send a signal and it can either connect or disconnect that particular residential form. And we've saved almost $400,000 doing that. Now, saving money is great when we can through the technology. And we knew that when we did reduce truck rolls, we would save approximately, some money doing that. But to me, if you look at that line, the more impressive figure there is we think we've saved internally to KUB approximately 1.2 million miles driven. And while again, that's fuel not burned and that's maintenance not having to be done on vehicles, at the end of the day, the more impressive stat for me is that that's not emissions in the air and that we have a cleaner community, and it really represents KUB's investment in a better environment for our area. The purpose of a meter read is to improve, is to be able to generate a bill, and always creating a great bill at KUB has been important to us for a long time. But just, almost the science of removing the human aspect out of the process of gathering that read has improved our billing accuracy. So if we take a snapshot in time and look back to May of 2019, just last year, now that we've fully deployed our meters, we're up to a billing accuracy of 99.95%, and that's really great. And to move the needle that much is really impressive internally. And I know our customers ultimately are the ones that kind of benefit from that. We also knew that, as I've said, that this technology was foundational and would provide for other benefits. And so really pleased that even in the short time that these have been being deployed and now fully deployed, we've been able to utilize some of the benefits there as well. You've heard a lot today about TOU and restructuring of rates and so forth and so on. Our rate staff has been able to have data that they've really never been able to have before. They've been able to peel back the layer there and understand how a customer's usage would operate during a given day on an hourly basis. Mr. Walker talked about being sure we kind of, slot that rate right. And so now we've got that data to know for certain what that looks like. We've been before this board before and said, we've had situations that our water meters are able to detect very low flow and or constant flow. And that's been a nice a tool to be able to let our customers know, hey, you may have a leak. And there have been many examples of where a lot of times we'll let them know, hey, we think you've got a leak inside your home. They say, no, I don't. And upon further review, they do. And so that's a good thing, not only in saving their water and wastewater consumption, but also any potential damage inside the home. I talked about increased accuracy of billing. When we don't get it right, we have an obligation to go back and back bill our customers. Nobody likes that. And the fact that we're better at that means that not only are we having to do fewer of those, but the fact that we're able to find them sooner really has reduced not only the number, but the impact to our customers. And that's a win as well. Some of our customers from time to time don't behave as it relates to, they think that they can steal our service, and that's just a reality of the utility business. And the good news about these meters is that really makes it hard on them. If somebody pulls that meter, if they do something physically to that meter, we know, we're alerted. And so we know that our tampering investigations have gone down. At the same time, we still know folks are really creative, and so we continue to work to reduce that more and more. But these meters do make it very tough on them to do that. And then finally, just kind of an interesting byproduct of the project. When we went to do this, there really wasn't an application on the market that would help us manage this work, both for internal resources and our contractor. And so our internal IT staff, working with the grid mod team, decided to embark on a project to really build our own in-house application. And they did such a good job that we're actually using it board-wide now for a lot of our mobile workforce management in that regard. And when folks even from the outside see it, they want to know where we bought it. So it's kind of neat that folks take the blueprint to heart, that we value innovation, and it's really great to know that we've got such talented staff on our payroll that can build these kind of things. Always amazed at what they do. So that was something that came out of the project, but that innovation led to an application now that KUB uses board-wide. So really the bulk of today's discussion was about the meters and that 4-year deployment, but also mentioned the 10-year rollout of fiber and our continued investment in distribution automation. We'll talk about that in a second. You can kind of see on the map here where we stand today. We've installed about 150 miles of fiber. Those dots on the screen are our electric substations. So you can see we're starting to connect those together. We've been at that a little while now. We've got 150 miles out. If you roll to the next map, where we want to be by FY30. Jay, can you go ahead and, there we go. Where we want to be by FY30, you kind of see the full build out. That'll probably be right at 300 miles of fiber, and it'll connect all of our operational facilities along the way. And again, we've really received the benefit of, as we remove those copper circuits, one, if they're ours, we're not having to maintain them as much and they're not failing as much, and that's a good thing. If we do lease some of those, and again, the maintenance on those was becoming very expensive, and as such, when we get to drop that maintenance, we save our customers money, so that's a good thing too. On distribution automation side, distribution automation are those devices on our electric system that will sense an outage getting ready to occur, a fault or something that would knock a customer out. And they are smart enough to anticipate what that is, and they will take action to avoid that. And really, our customer benefits from that, and they don't kind of see that outage. We've been able to deploy about 100 of these devices across a number of different circuits, and just on blue sky days. So, the typical tree that falls or the vehicle that hits the pole and knocks somebody out of service or knocks a circuit out of service. Since July 1 of 2019, so almost a year, full year of this past fiscal year, we've saved nearly 1.4 million customer minutes of interruptions, even on blue sky days. But where these devices can really shine is even in a storm, because if you remember right at the beginning of the pandemic period, so to speak, at the end of March, we had a pretty significant storm come through. And on that day alone, these devices saved our customers nearly the same amount of minutes that they've saved on blue sky days for the year. Now, more importantly than those minutes is that next bullet there that says over 4,000 customers really never saw a blink because these devices operated, rerouted their power supply, and kept them in service. And that storm in itself was about a 6 million minute CMI. So you can see that, again, this technology is really providing a benefit. We'll continue to deploy that. It's even doing better than we thought, and we're really excited about continuing to expand that on our distribution system. As I've said a number of times, this technology is foundational, and it's going to really allow us to do a lot of neat things, both internally and externally at KUB. Without these meters, I think you heard Mr. Walker say, without these meters, we couldn't do TOU rates. We're really excited about being able to do that. It'll probably be one of the first things that we do outside of what we had planned to do just with strict meter reading and connections. But also on the horizon is a new payment program that we want to roll out about prepaid utility services. And that is exactly what it kind of sounds like, no different than prepaid cell phones or our Starbucks cards that we charge up. You would prepay KUB, and as you use that, you would know exactly where you stand every day as far as your balance with KUB, and you could recharge that account as you go along through the month. And what we've seen at other utilities that utilize that service, it's just a payment option that customers seem to like. Some want to utilize it, some don't, but it's just, again, a great way for us to offer other options for our customers. On the information front and enhancing the customer experience, it was just a few years ago that we were able to expose this information to our customers, and so now it seems like it's everyday business. But we were really looking forward to I'll call it kind of portal/mobile app 2.0. That will be some enhancements now that we're able to focus on that and really enrich that and provide our customers more information at their fingertips, and we're really excited about that, and those projects are ongoing. When you take this technology and kind of connect it all together, the infrastructure related to the networks, the distribution automation, helping reliability, the meters giving us the information, and then partnering that then with what is right now around the corner with our new ADMS system or an outage management system, we really believe we can enhance the customer's experience and improve their reliability, detecting when those outages are going to occur, taking action before it does, and then even in the case of where we can't, be able to provide a better response to them by knowing where those outages are, where we need to marshal our forces, and what the system's kind of telling us. So we're really excited about what's on the horizon with these things. And honestly, there's probably things that we haven't even dreamed up or thought of, but it really, at the end of the day, has been a great project. Almost everybody at KUB has participated in this project in some way because it is so transformational. Really appreciate the folks that have really put a lot of lifeblood into this project, and really glad to have been a part of it personally. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Do we have any questions from the commissioners? All right, hearing none, I'll take it back to Gabe.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. Last presentation. Last August, we came to the board to pass a resolution to allow us to do a project with the folks at First Utility District. We had some customers that are on a border of our utilities, water, wastewater customers, that we wanted to kind of clean up and make it more efficient and more obvious to our customers who they're being served by. So I'd like to introduce Shane Bragg, acting manager of our Water Systems Engineering Group, to give you an overview of that project that was finished last month. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Bolus. Good afternoon, commissioners. I appreciate the time to speak today and give an update on this project. About a year and a half ago, there was a developer looking at property along Kingston Pike, just west of Gallagher View Road. This is an area where there's a Buddy's Barbecue, Books A Million. You may be familiar with that area. But through working with KUB and First Utility District, the developer discovered a privately owned wastewater pump station that served 5 properties through a private collection system. This created a unique opportunity for KUB and First Utility District in that we were able to resolve several issues for customers being served by a private utility, and also to clean up the utility boundary so that these customers have one bill for water and wastewater service. KUB Resolution 1401 approved in August 2019 allowed this project to proceed and a new service boundary to be established. Next slide, please. The 11 properties shown in yellow had KUB wastewater service and First Utility District water service. You can see that the previous boundary had an interconnect meter that existed, allowing both utility companies to help each other with water supply during emergency situations. Next slide, please. And on the map, this shows some of the things that were accomplished on the project. And through detailed collaboration between Knoxville Utilities Board and First Utility District, there were a few things that occurred. FUD was able to assume ownership and maintenance of the private wastewater collection system. And FUD also constructed a new joint FUD developer-funded wastewater pump station and force main that's owned, operated, and maintained by the utility. You'll see in orange there on the map. Those are the 5 wastewater customers that KUB transferred to FUD. You can also see the new pump station there at 8520. Shown in blue are the 6 water customers and the roughly 850-foot section of water main that First Utility District transferred to KUB. And then, of course, the new service boundary is shown and it has been established. The relocated interconnect meter moved from North Gallagher View Road, shown at the location on the map. And I also want to acknowledge the departments within KUB that worked internally and also worked outwardly with FUD during this process. You know, as Jamie mentioned previously, there were a lot of folks that were a part of this project, as with most projects we do. So I want to acknowledge the groups that were a part of this, the meters group, certainly our new service engineering, our new service department, rates, meters, underground construction, the list goes on. Our legal team was heavily involved in this process as well. A unique aspect of this project is that coordination, scheduling, and construction was able to occur over the month of April. Back one slide, please. And this was while the nation was responding to the events surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. So email, remote conferencing, social distancing construction practices allow both utilities to safely and effectively complete the work. Additionally, customer utility service advisors communicated with stakeholders to accommodate evolving business needs throughout the process. Our customer service group was instrumental in making sure this project went well. The picture on the left shows KUB crews placing the relocated interconnect meter, and the picture on the right shows FUD mobilized to make connections into the new pump station. And one thing to realize, this is a pretty heavily congested area of Kingston Pike, so certainly the timing of doing this work was helpful, obviously with the traffic control and then the excavations around that large interconnect meter. You can kind of see the size and scope of that excavation that's adjacent to Kingston Pike, so the timing was very helpful with that. Next slide, please. So the exchange benefited KUB and First Utility District. Mainly, there are more distinct service boundaries between KUB and First Utility District, and a single utility service provider for 11 customers. Again, that means one bill for water and wastewater service. A new pump station is now maintained by First Utility District, and the existing water interconnection was maintained that allows KUB and First Utility District to help each other with water demand during emergency situations. And finally, a strengthened collaborative relationship, creating a stronger partnership between KUB and First Utility District. That concludes my presentation. May I answer any questions?
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from any of the commissioners? All right. Again, thank you very much for the presentation, Shane.
Thank you.
As I stated previously, members of the public were invited to pre-register to address the board today. We had no one to register to make any comments at today's meeting. So before we adjourn the board meeting today, is there any other business or are there any other comments from the commissioners? All right, hearing none, this meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.